All right, welcome to this explainer. Today we are going on a seriously mind-bending journey. We're going to travel all the way from the very creation of the universe right down into the deepest logic of the human mind. We're looking at some truly profound concepts today, drawing from deep theological and philosophical texts to figure out exactly how ancient scholars viewed existence itself.
Now, have you ever stopped to think that every single breath you take could actually hold the secret of how the universe was created? It sounds wild, right? But what's really fascinating here is the root sound hu. It's the literal sound of our breath, pointing to the divine Hüve. In these texts, that sound is deeply connected to the divine presence and the very expansion of reality. So every single breath we take isn't just basic biology. It's seen as a metaphysical sign. It points directly to the ultimate reality, reminding us of our absolute origin with every single inhale and exhale.
So let's dive into our first major concept, the universal breath and the mystery of Hüve, to see how the cosmos itself is practically breathing.
There's this incredible term used by Islamic mystics, Nafas al-Rahman, which translates to the breath of the Merciful. Basically, they don't see the universe as just some static, lifeless object. Instead, it's this highly dynamic cycle completely driven by this cosmic breath. What this means is that the universe is in a constant, ongoing state of creation, that's the exhaling, and dissolution, the inhaling. So even things like decay or destruction aren't viewed as chaotic at all. They are literally just a natural, essential part of this divine cosmic breathing. It's the ultimate rhythm of the cosmos.
And what's amazing is how Scripture actually mirrors this exact cosmic rhythm. Take Quranic chapters like Inshikak and Infitar. They literally represent the exhaling and inhaling of this universal breath. You see, Inshikak represents the expansion, the giving of breath, kind of like the cracking open of the seed of existence. On the flip side, you have Infitar, which represents the contraction or the taking back of that breath. The whole universe is effectively breathing in and out through these epic cosmic phases.
Okay, moving right along to Section 2, the Divine Spirit. Let's see how this grand cosmic breath scales all the way down to you and me.
When the text mentions that God breathed into him of his spirit, we have to be super clear about what that actually means. The human soul is a divine reflection of the Creator, absolutely not a literal physical piece of him. The source text strongly rejects ideas like reincarnation or pantheism. We aren't just divisible fragments of the divine walking around, we are reflections, essentially holding a mirror up to the absolute.
Think about it like you're blowing on a campfire. You're the one blowing, and the fire gets ignited, right? But no part of you actually transfers into the flames. You don't lose a piece of yourself, yet the fire is suddenly ignited and just bursts into life. That is the exact metaphor used here to explain how the divine breath sparks human consciousness into existence, all without transferring any literal physical parts of the divine into us.
So, what exactly catches fire inside of us? Well, through this divine breath, we're granted these partial, limited versions of God's absolute traits. For instance, our partial intellect directly reflects absolute intellect. Our partial will is a reflection of absolute will, and our partial power comes from absolute power. It's these specific reflections that fundamentally separate us from the rest of creation, giving us this profound, even if limited, level of consciousness.
All right, let's pivot a bit to Section 3, Names, Actions, and Gratitude. This is where we look at a really fascinating theological contrast regarding how God interacts with the world and how we're supposed to respond.
So there's a really vital distinction made in these texts between Esma and Efal. God's names, the Esma, are entirely eternal. They're constant and unchanging, representing the absolute divine essence. But on the other hand, his actions, or Efal, are variable. These actions constantly fluctuate. They increase, they decrease, and they respond incredibly dynamically to human behavior and the everyday choices that we make. Because of this difference, our response is essentially split into two categories, Hamd and Shukr. Hamd is this unconditional praise that is directed entirely at God's constant essence, his Esma. It absolutely shouldn't change whether you happen to be experiencing a personal loss or a massive gain. But Shukr? That is conditional gratitude. It's directed specifically at the Efal, those fluctuating blessings and actions that we experience every single day.
Now here is where it gets incredibly practical. Real gratitude, true shukr, actually requires action. You have to give back from the exact same type of blessing you were given. Check this out. Zakat, which is financial charity, is the specific gratitude for wealth. Sharing knowledge, That's your gratitude for intellect. Giving advice is how you show gratitude for the gift of speech. And dedicating your life to struggle and charity is the ultimate gratitude for life itself. You see, you can't just say thank you for having a sharp mind. You literally have to go out and teach.
Okay, moving from our actions over to our words, let's jump into section 4, the command say, and how it's used to construct the mind.
2,697. That is a massive number. It's exactly how many times the name Allah appears in the text. It's the most frequently mentioned name by a complete landslide. And why is that? Because the primary goal here isn't just to tell nice stories. It is actively trying to construct human understanding of the Creator, placing that exact concept at the absolute dead center of human cognition.
So, how does the text actually build that understanding? A lot of it comes down to the sheer power of a single command, kul, which translates to say. Whenever you add the command kul right before a verse, it totally shifts the paradigm. It takes a basic news statement and turns it into a psychological anchor. It demands a loud verbal declaration. And by forcing the reader to say it exactly as commanded, it instantly rejects any of our own personal made-up definitions of God. It leaves zero room for misinterpretation. Basically, you aren't defining the Creator. The Creator is defining Himself for you.
Let's move on to section 5, 3 bricks. We're going to look at the underlying logic of faith here and how we actually perceive reality.
The text outlines 2 types of reasoning, inductive and deductive. Basically, we use inductive reasoning, which means looking at specific smaller parts of nature to logically find the Creator. But once found, and this is a huge shift, deductive reasoning has to take the wheel. You place the Creator at the absolute center of your mind, and from that one central truth, you deduce and interpret the rest of reality.
Let's test that inductive reasoning right now. Imagine you're just walking down a road and you see 3 bricks perfectly stacked on top of one another. What's the literal first thing that pops into your head? You're going to ask, who stacked these?
Your mind immediately goes to work trying to solve the puzzle, right? You'd think, oh, maybe some passerby stacked them for fun. Or, hey, maybe the property owner put them there as a marker. You would honestly come up with dozens of scenarios involving a conscious person acting on those bricks way before you would ever conclude that they just magically fell off a passing truck and perfectly stacked themselves by pure random chance.
And this brilliantly illustrates the core argument we're looking at today. If our brains are completely hardwired to demand a conscious builder for 3 entirely mundane, boring bricks, then this incredibly complex, magnificent universe is its own self-evident proof. The underlying logic is that the sheer existence and intricate design of the world around us absolutely require a builder, way more than those 3 little stacked bricks ever could.
Which brings us to our grand finale in Section 6, the secret to happiness, and what this all actually means for our daily lives.
The source text distills this whole entire journey into one profound truth. Mutluluğun sırrı Allah'ı bilmektir. The secret to happiness is knowing Allah. When we recognize our place in this massive breathing cosmos, when we finally understand the reflections of the divine within ourselves and align our logic with actual reality, we realize something huge. True, lasting happiness isn't about chasing fleeting pleasures. It can literally only flow from deeply knowing the absolute source of all existence. So, I want to leave you with this one thought to chew on today. Based on everything we've just unpacked, are you looking for happiness in the fluctuating, temporary actions of the world, or in the eternal essence of its creator?